it was a adventure from one little helicopter to 20 Phenom 300s flying all over the country, over 100 pilots. I don't miss managing almost 200 people on a day-to-day basis. I got to say, it's nice to have a little bit of that pressure off of me. But yeah.
Managing 100 pilots would make me mental.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work. I think too, I talk to hospital administrators and I feel like it's the same management challenge that you have even with like doctors and other highly skilled professionals. Like these are folks that are really, really, really good at what they do. That doesn't mean they're good at everything that they're interested in. And sometimes, there's a bit of a, well, let me tell you how you should run this business. And you're like, I got the MBA, that's my zone. So let me manage that and let me help you do what you want.
You do the doctoring and the piloting, and I'll do the
administrative
stuff.
Yeah, but give them a challenge, pay them well, and give them a challenge, and they'll go for it. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Like, hey, look, so what you do, you start out at 407. So talk about the history of GrandView. 407, I think it was all medevac.
So that was our background. We actually had a Bell 407. The owners at the time, mostly it was kind of a personal use situation. They enjoyed the helicopter. They wanted to fly at places. And at some point, they got hooked up with Johns Hopkins University, who needed to do organ transportation. They had been doing it in medevac configured helicopters, which isn't really conducive for a medevac team. There's not enough spaces for the doctors to sit on. It's the organs in a box, so there's nothing involving medical equipment in any way. A VIP configured aircraft made a lot more sense for that mission than the medevac one. So we were one of the first to do it. I think, because this was back in 2004, one of the first companies to ever transport doctor teams off of medevac aircraft and putting them into actual VIP aircraft. So that was the foundation. After years and years, our doctor teams just begged us to get into the fixed wing business. We're like, no, we're helicopter people. We don't mess with those things. And then funnily enough, we did very, very well with fixed wing aircraft, and actually found it was a lot easier to manage those aircraft than helicopters in the long run.
Whoa, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you there. So you grew to 20, but so you ultimately, one helicopter, a couple Phenoms, a couple Phenoms is, it's not an insignificant investment, but it's not 20 Phenoms.
Yeah, it was very organic. We just kind of added fleet as we had a need. I'll say I was in the extremely fortunate position of having the partners that could invest in those personally. So they were all personally owned by us. We held the notes on all of them and operated them. So we didn't lease. It was a owned and operated fleet. But not everybody has partners that can support that kind of growth. And I will say too, at the time of acquisition, we weren't really planning on a sale necessarily. We were looking for outside investment, because when you get to over $100 billion in debt, you start to need some larger pockets, deeper pockets to help you along that way. And that's kind of what led us to acquisition, that we were looking for a partner, and it just so happened that they wanted to acquire. So
I got you. And so was most of the business, the vast majority of the business, was it newer Phenoms? Were the hospital chains really, were they just, they must have been, a lot of air ambulance companies are out there flying, you got 45-year-old Lear 35s and whatever else. And all of a sudden you guys come along with some pretty modern.
Yeah, it was all about efficiency. I always loved the Southwest model, and I completely copied it. So I saw Herb Kelleher's plan and was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So having all the same fleet, super, super efficient aircraft. The Phenom 300, from an operating cost perspective, dispatch reliability perspective, was just phenomenal, pun intended. So we just went with that. And we were at the point where we're getting ready to buy our own simulator to do our own training in-house, because we had enough pilots to support that. So when you have that hyper efficient, super cost conscious way of operating, even if they're new or a little bit used, you'd be paying that anyway. Older aircraft, you'd be down so much, so often. You'd have to pay so much more for maintenance costs. You're going to pay one way or the other. Either you get a cheaper airplane up front and operate something older, or you get a new fleet that you can really operate efficiently and make good margin on and pay that way. So our approach was newer, not always from the factory, sometimes a couple of years old, but that was our approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. By the time this podcast comes out, another one will have been released. It's with John Matthews over at AirX in London. And his opinion was, we got rid of all third-party maintenance. Every cost that we could get rid of, we So we do it all in house.
Vertical integration. Yeah. And that's especially, I think, after the pandemic and the supply chain shortages that we had, everyone was so much more conscious of, okay, I can't really rely on anybody else because they have their own problems. So what can I do myself that doesn't, cause me to outsource? So we've all gotten a lot, tighter in how we operate now because of that.
Yeah, no doubt. What was the biggest surprise you had about running and growing? Good or bad? What was the biggest surprise you had about running a 20 aircraft fleet?
I think, the nice part is there are much bigger stressors when you get to such a large size. Like, your problems are much bigger, but at the same time, you also have so much more distribution of a team to help you that it's a relief. I think when we were in like this, under 5 airplanes, lean staff, lean everything, had to do it all yourself. Yep. Taking phone calls 24 hours a day. I mean, I still always took phone calls 24 hours a day, but I didn't have them as frequently when I got to the scale that we did. And that was a nice observation that you may be hustling now as a small business owner, but one day when you get to that mid-market size, like, yeah, your decisions are more intense, but you also you also have the experience along the way, but it's much more of a relief, and you feel like you really have this great team and support network around you to handle whatever the crazy things that get thrown at you are. And that's nice.